I've been lifting for 15 years naturally, and if you asked me my first 1 to 3 years of lifting how big I'd be by now, I would have told you I was going to look like a Mr. Olympia competitor, maybe a little smaller, all naturally. But that's just how insanely delusional our expectations are for our physiques when we first start lifting and seeing some gains. We think it's going to be that way forever. Now today, I turned 30 years old. I started lifting at 14 years old, and I've documented most of the last 7 years or so on YouTube. This is the truth of what it's like to live for 15 years naturally, or at least this is my journey, the pros and cons I've experienced as a result, some important lessons along the way, and what's next. So hopefully you find this helpful and inspiring for your own journey towards your best physique and your best self. I started lifting at 14 years old. You see, just starting the 9th grade, I decided to join the varsity football team, which was full of bigger and more experienced 12th graders, so that essentially left me no choice. After getting pummeled into the ground in just the first few practices, I asked myself a very important question. Am I going to quit, or am I going to try to compete? Which one was it going to be? I determined from that moment on, before I quit anything that I truly wanted to do, I'm going to give it my best shot first. Now, if after 6 months I still hate it or haven't made any progress, then I'll quit. I had a 50-pound bench set and a 7-pound pink plastic set of dumbbells in my parents' basement. That day, I decided that every single time I went home from school, I would go downstairs and I would bench until I couldn't anymore and curl the 7-pound dumbbells until my arms couldn't bend anymore. I was probably already getting to around 6 feet tall by this time, probably weighing in at somewhere around 150 pounds, okay? After the first couple of weeks of coming home and doing what I set out to do, I was still getting my ass beat in football, sure, but at least I was learning some of the skills there. But I still needed to build muscle and strength faster. So I decided to walk over to the old-ass computer my parents had and use the internet to see if I could find out how to build muscle and strength. I typed in the phrase, "how to build muscle" into Google, and my life changed forever. I stumbled across this weird website at the time called YouTube, where I saw a video of Scott Herman Fitness, who was probably one of the 4 fitness channels online at that time. I was instantly shocked at the guy I was seeing on the screen. I was in disbelief that somebody could look like this guy did. He was jacked, ripped, athletic. I thought this was something reserved for only movies. He was also lifting 100-pound dumbbells in each arm, which was a big contrast to my 20-pound dumbbell bench at that time. In the moment I thought, okay, that's it. I am going to achieve this physique one day. And I figured all the performance benefits that would come along with it. From then on, my obsession grew and I began looking forward to learning new things around the topic of building muscle and building a great physique, getting stronger, etc. Now, unfortunately, while my burning passion for it was there, my mindset and knowledge was so poor, I would spend the next 4 years of high school lifting constantly, while also binge drinking, smoking weed nearly daily, eating nothing but pizza for lunch, chicken nuggets for dinner, and drinking Coca-Cola any chance I got. Oh, I was also probably sleeping about 5 hours a night most times, seeing as my stomach and body were in constant distress and indigestion from my trash habits. So over those 4 years, what progress was made? Well, I put on maybe 20 pounds, though most of it was just from growing to 6'2". So I left high school, sure, slightly stronger. I mean, I was bench pressing 2 plates for a rep or 2, which essentially made me a god amongst men in the pool of 16 and 17-year-olds. But I left high school really a measly 6'2", maybe 170 pounds, probably sitting at around 15 to 16% body fat. So my struggles were countless during this time, as my entire life was complete chaos, right? I was far from a well-behaved kid who followed any rules at all. And though I saw little progress in the gym, there was something me and my family had realized. I never quit the gym. I would work out daily. Hungover? Workout. Hell, I would go to the gym drunk still sometimes. 2 hours of football practice, I'd go to the gym straight after with basically no food, work out another 2 hours. Okay, it was impossible to ignore. The gym was my thing, and fitness was my path. Did I look like it? Fuck no. Did I feel like it? Not even close, but there was something there. And I think that if the passion is that strong, sometimes it alone is enough to carry you until you succeed, as we'll soon see. So after being one of the worst students of all time in high school, my dreams of becoming a lawyer quickly went down the drain because I realized that, oh, that means I actually need decent grades if I want to be accepted to a university. Well, basically no university would accept me at this time. However, some colleges would. Better yet, I found a program called Health and Fitness Promotion at a college here in Canada, and I thought, well, if I'm going to go to school, might as well be for lifting. I did a victory lap after high school, so I started college at 18, and funny enough, this was the first time I also stumbled upon a new YouTube channel called Physiques of Greatness, who just started up. The main guy at the time, Chris Jones, who still has a great channel today, was absolutely deezed, okay? I wanted that physique, and I was still motivated as ever, but then he introduced me to the dirty bulk, and what it actually looked like to eat to actually gain weight and also to even track body weight at all in the first place. I always thought it was a hard gainer and that I ate so much food, but I was just destined to be on the skinnier side. But then I also thought that if I just kept lifting, eventually I'd automatically look like Jay Cutler still. So my expectations were way out of whack, okay? Now, I saw what the dirty bulk was and I decided at 18, fine, I'm gonna actually just double every single meal that I currently eat and see what happens. In other words, I'm gonna actually try to eat more food. If my typical breakfast was 2 bagels and cream cheese, it was now 4. If dinner was 1 plate of pasta, it was now 2, and so on. Okay, so to my surprise, being so naive about this, I weighed myself every week and I saw the scale going up consistently. In the first year of college, I had gotten up to 200 pounds, which blew my mind. I suddenly could bench press 225 pounds for an easy 5 or 6 reps. Okay, I got stronger and I built a decent amount of muscle, even though my training was not ideal at all. I also made some lifetime friends in college who were all passionate about lifting like me, and we started watching these famous fitness YouTubers during class, and all we talked about was getting jacked and how awesome our lift at lunch was going to be. Yes, I was still a pretty bad student, and yes, I was still drinking and partying way too often, but now I actually had the calories that allowed me to grow some serious muscle and strength. And I also downloaded this interesting app at the time that had just come out called MyFitnessPal. This app allowed me to track my food more closely. Maybe you've heard of it, okay? So from 18 to 20 years old, I ran my first 2 dirty bulks. The first one, I finished at 210 pounds and then I cut down to around 190. My second one got me to 225 pounds and I cut down to 200. Sure, I fucked the cuts and bulks up quite a bit, but I trained like an animal and I ate like one. So I graduated college, but more importantly than graduating college, by 20 years old, I was looking pretty solid at 200 pounds now. I was sitting somewhere around 14 to 15% body fat, more than likely. I learned the importance of tracking food and eating big to get big, as well as also actually tracking body weight regularly, and how shit keto and some of these other named diets were because I experimented using them on some of my cuts, okay? I started learning the importance of nutrition. Yes, 6 years into this shit, I started learning the importance of nutrition. But clearly, I still didn't learn the importance of alcohol intake, caffeine intake, sleep, food quality, and all the rest. My training was still mostly a bro split style of training. I was hammering one muscle group 2 hours on its own each day. But, I love looking back and knowing just how crazy being so young can be, and the fact that your body can tolerate all of the abuse, and still, if you do some of the basic things and you train like an absolute monster consistently, you can come out looking pretty good, okay? Also, if you're surrounded by other jacked guys doing the same thing, okay? Or jacked individuals. So, I also, by the way, got some personal training experience here directly during this time. So, my skill of actually helping others accomplish this, which in turn also helps me in my journey, began already at 19. So now at 20 years old, despite not sleeping, eating healthy, not slowing down on the partying, or any of the degeneracy, I started to think, damn, I really thought I'd look like Jay Cutler by now. Maybe jumping on steroids is the only way, and I think I'm in a good spot to do them, if anything. But at the same time, at 20 years old, I happened to get my first gym job at LA Fitness, and my life and outlook changed massively again. You see, I was thrown into a sales job, so now at 20 years old, this was a seriously crazy time for me for a few reasons. Firstly, I accelerated my social skills to a level that I did not realize or expect by forcing myself to try and succeed in sales. This also got me to pick up fucking reading, which as someone who paid at school was hilarious to me. And I ended up going on to read a ton of books afterwards. But I started actually caring about making money, becoming more successful, establishing a life for myself. And I also embarked on quite possibly the greatest dirty bulk the world has ever known. I was consuming 5,500 to 6,000 calories per day, which got me to blow up to about 248 pounds at my peak. Yes, 6'2", 248 naturally. It was the first time I started getting asked if I was on juice already. You see, I was actually too busy to even look into steroids seriously yet after that first contemplation because I was working at the gym 6 days a week, 10-hour shifts. I was lifting 3 hours a day in between shifts. I had my mom on literal payroll to cook 3,000 calories a day for me every morning of the 6,000. And I was walking about 20,000 steps per day, sleeping 6 hours a night, partying every weekend, drinking like a fish, and ultimately getting out of my shell socially, which led to me having a ton of fun during this time. Of course, this was not sustainable, and after several months of this insanity, I topped it off with quitting my gym job, coming down with strep throat and the flu at the same time, and losing an obscene amount of gains in just 2 weeks as a result. So from 20 to 21 years old, I felt like I lived 15 years of memories and experiences, but more importantly, I also hit a 315-pound bench, a 425-pound squat, and a 545-pound deadlift, which actually isn't all that impressive for somebody that was weighing that much, But to me, those were the biggest numbers I ever hit at that time. Now, after this absolute hailstorm of 20 and 21 years old, by 22 years old, I finally bit the bullet and cut down from this messy bulk, only to find out I didn't really put on all that much muscle through all of it. Okay, I wonder why, right? I came to 22 years old, back down to 200 pounds, looking maybe slightly better, probably around 12%, but definitely not worth that dirty bulk. So this was when I really learned that the dirty bulk was probably not the way to go anymore. At 22, I contemplated steroids one last time, but through the life I had just lived for the last 2 years, I learned a few important things that made it obvious I would never take steroids. Number one, no amount of health is worth 20 extra pounds of dysfunctional muscle mass. Number two, 20 extra pounds of muscle doesn't make me a better person, as I learned a lot during that time of what actually does. And number three, 20 pounds of muscle and lifting 200-pound dumbbells gets me no extra excitement, no extra success, no extra mental growth, no extra women, no extra charisma, no extra confidence, nothing, okay? And lastly, I asked myself a key question. What would happen if I gave this thing my all naturally? What if I actually slept well? What if I actually ate well? What if I slowed down on the partying and drinking? What sort of physique can I achieve then? Well, I would find out. Oh, I also directly coached over 400 people in this 2-year span, so I gained a ton of coaching experience during that entire process, so that's another bonus. Okay, so I'm 22 years old and I stumbled across the first science-based complete manual for body composition manipulation, and I essentially mastered the entire game overnight by doing so. It was called the Muscle and Strength Pyramid books. There's 2 of them by Dr. Eric Helms. After dissecting and reading these 2 books, for training and nutrition entirely, I instantly filled all of the remaining gaps about what I didn't yet know when it came to building muscle and strength, losing fat, and building a great physique. I then decided to apply it, of course. At the end of 22, weighing about 200 pounds, around that 13% body fat, I decided to go on my first lean bulk and track every single aspect along the way. So I dialed in my training much better, finally hitting muscle groups on a higher frequency split, a conservative surplus with maximum focus on progressive overload, optimized macros, as well as careful monitoring of my weight. So during the next 10 to 12 months of doing this, I packed on a crazy amount of muscle. I went on to one of the most successful bulks to date for me, besides my current one. The cool thing is, this is when I also started my YouTube channel, so you can actually see all of this progress documented early on my channel from 22 years old. By the peak of this bulk, I hit 222 pounds and I had a DEXA scan also logged on my channel that put me at around 13% body fat, though it was likely closer to 16 to 17%. I then went on to my most successful cut of all time, which is documented in the playlist on my channel called The Cutting Chronicles. This ended me at 204 pounds and an estimated 10% body fat. This was my peak physique so far, and with a complete breakdown and showcase of it on my channel as well, you can go out and check that out. I finished this at around 24 years old. Now, this really taught me the value of tracking everything closely, monitoring, and actually applying a predictable calculated formula to the whole thing. Now, during this time, I started my online business while also directly coaching in studios and one-on-one training on the side. All of this allowed me to run these formulas on a bunch of different people in a bunch of different situations, and I began churning out transformations left, right, and center amongst just my own. It was a validated formula and it helped me improve on helping others do the same. I could help anybody achieve the physique they wanted essentially at this point. The only downside of this time, despite the great progress, was I learned a harsh lesson, the importance of sleep. At one point, documented through the vlogs on my channel, you would see me waking up at 3:30 a.m., reading a book a week, working 70 plus hours a week, and still going out at times. I was also pumping large amounts of caffeine, all of which ended up messing up my health quite a bit through this whole thing. Now, luckily, I decided to wake up, literally and figuratively, and decided I needed to start focusing on my sleep more to recover, ease on the caffeine. And it was also around this time that I essentially gave up drinking and partying altogether, since I started really grinding like an animal to grow my business, social media audience, and of course, my physique. Now, at 25, I moved out to this spot right here, and the pandemic hit shortly after that. I was at the start of a new amazing bulk that was going to take me and my physique to the supposed next level, but we all know what happened in 2020. This instantly put a huge wrench in my plans, and for 3 months, I had no access to gym equipment at all, which caused a lot of my gains to melt away. This actually had me starting to fall into a depressive state. Luckily, I took action and found a private gym to go to anyways during this time, and as a result, I got some of my gains back, and I was able to hold on to them. In fact, most of my gains. Unfortunately, after about 8 months of only being able to train 3 times a week, maybe 4 for limited periods of time, when the gyms opened back up, I attempted to triple down and make up for lost time, and I ended up going way too hard and I started sustaining injuries. Namely, a really bad low back injury when squatting, a forearm and bicep injury from doing too much arm volume, and chronic knee issues. This, combined with working extraordinary amounts still, waking up at 3:30 a.m. or 4 a.m. for years, training at 6 a.m. and so on, I burned out, physically and mentally. And because of this, my love for the game started to dim. I would attempt to go on another proper lean bulk once again at 27 years old, but I had developed odd eating behaviors that essentially led to binges and caused me to spill over by 15 pounds rapidly, coupled with the injuries. So I then finally decided to bring the body fat down to a reasonable level. I started noticing that my physique was not looking anywhere close to its prime anymore. I felt like an old man at the same time at just 27, 28 years old, with just trying to get up from a seated position, being tough on my knees, or bending over in any capacity was feeling like my back was going to snap. I was a shadow of my former self as far as my physique and fitness went. The love died, prioritization fell, and my mental and physical burnout in the business took its toll. So here I was, having lifted 13 years naturally, hardly having anything to show for it, I felt. But it wouldn't last long. By the end of the cut to sort of reset, I found myself at 28 years old, around 196 pounds at around 10% body fat or so. Though it doesn't seem too far off from the peak physique, there's probably at least 5 pounds of muscle lost, which makes a big difference. The biggest lesson I learned during this time was that a physique journey is going to be different for everybody, and things will not always go as planned forever. If you aren't completely on point, and you try to do away with some of the basics here or there, like rest or get greedy and try to speed run results in any way, you're going to pay the price and you could lose some of the progress that you think you'll never lose. Another lesson is that putting your physique and fitness on the back burner, even for a moment, is never truly worth it. It also sunk in for me that by now, even years ago, I thought I would have had 15 pounds more muscle and be way leaner. We often like to think that the gains we can truly make will be so crazy when we're younger or when we first start, because we're seeing fast gains then. So people will look at somebody like myself, who's still currently around 214 pounds, 15% body fat. I mean, it's no slouch, but they'll think, you've been lifting for 15 years? Bro, I'm bigger than you in 8 months. No, bro, you aren't. And the chances you ever will be are extremely small. But I get it because I used to think the same thing. So from 28 years old to now turning 30 today, I've been in a huge lean bulk. Like I said, back to around 214 pounds, probably 15 to 16% body fat. The fire has been reignited. I'm making back a ton of the lost gains, potentially even pushing to a place close to peak physique territory. We'll see if I can go beyond it this time around. I've been dialed in on tracking everything, methodically lining things up, and training has been the best it's been since 2019. Eating behavior and schedule is very reasonable. Business is no longer causing burnout and is growing. So all of the pain and suffering along the way truly was worth it. My goal weight right now is to reach somewhere around 220 by probably around January, February, and then I'm going to cut down and see where we land. 30 years old is super young in this game still, and I look forward to tons more progress and banging around the iron for another decade if I'm lucky. Ultimately, once you're training for about 10 years and doing a lot right, you'll probably be very close to the max of what your physique will look like, which will be impressive no matter your genetic makeup. Progress can still be made for many more years after that, but overall, if you're committed and patient enough to get there and still be in this game after 10 years, you'll know what I'm about to say is true. Every single moment of this journey is worth it. Stay natural and build a physique you can be proud of and that helps you be the best version of yourself in every endeavor. Do it for your future self. I look back at 14-year-old me, 18-year-old me, 22-year-old me, and I think, thank you for looking out for me, bro. You never quit, and that's what matters. And besides, by this time, you'll know. The physique itself is not nearly as respectable as the fact that the person had the discipline and commitment, and hence the character, to even last this long in the game in the first place. For all of you that do, I'll see you at the top.